Yo, what's good, y'all? What's good, y'all? I appreciate y'all for tapping in. I want to come from this perspective right now. It was called in my heart to talk about this, and I feel as if there's a lot of folks out there that are not showing up as their best self, showing up as your best self, and it's very important in all aspects of your life, not just at work, relationships, or just for other people to show up as your best self. Um, The reason why that's super important is because that's how you want to be portrayed. That's how you want to show up for the world. That's how you want to show up as your best self. Now, I want to specifically talk about this perspective of showing up as your best self in relationships because I feel as if, especially when we talk about dating, when we talk about, you know, getting into relationships, there isn't the context of how to show up. Sometimes we worry about our best self being the best clothes we got, or what type of car we drive, or where we live. But showing up as your best self is a lot more deeper than just outer appearance, especially when we talk about dating. Now, the one thing you have to take into consideration when you show up for your best self is presenting yourself from a healed perspective, presenting yourself as somebody who is ready to start dating, giving yourself the insight and giving, excuse me, the other person the insight of knowing that, hey, this person is actually the person for me because they're showing up as their full self. Now, you put yourself at a disadvantage when you don't show up as your full self. That's the problem when you show up as, half of yourself, or you show up as not being the full person that you want to be. Um, you don't really put your best foot forward, you're not going to get the results that you desire. It's just as if you went to a job interview and in that job interview you only did subpar. You're probably more than likely not going to get the job if you didn't show up as your best self or the best candidate as you possibly can. Now, in relationships, it comes down to a couple things I want to break down with you guys as we're talking about showing up as your best self. And the reason why I feel like a lot of folks don't show up as their best self, the first reason is the fear of failure. Um, the fear of, hey, if I show up as my best self, or if I show up as my full authentic self, I'm gonna waste my time. Especially when we talk about dating, especially with men in our relationships. You know, for men, we're very fragile. So when we talk about showing up as our best self or being our best self, or we tried all the things before, sometimes we may better backpedal a little bit because we don't want to feel that hurt again. We don't want to feel as if, when we failed before, unquote, we don't want to relive that hurt. So what we do, we don't show up as our fullest authentic selves. We're not vulnerable in situations. We're not vulnerable in our relationships, which in turns doesn't really put us at an advantage to really show up as the best person as we possibly can. Now, the other part of this with the fear of failure is there is a component where you may feel as if you need to be perfect. You may feel like, hey, I need to be perfect. I need to show perfectionism. I need to show up as my best self, is showing that I am perfect. You know, now obviously you don't want to show up as, having all these issues and having all these flaws. You probably shouldn't be dating if you have a lot of issues or a lot of flaws. Again, you want to show up as a healed version of yourself. But perfectionism is one of those things that isn't real. Perfectionism isn't really something that exists. So when we talk about being perfect, is that really something that you could really do? Does perfectionism really exist in your reality? I feel like at school we're taught like, okay, having 100% score is perfect. If you get 100%, there's no higher grade than 100%. There's no higher. You can't do better than 100%. So you want to strive for that 100%. But in actuality, you don't want to put that same mentality into you being perfect. You know, being the best version of yourself is not being perfect. It is acknowledging where you're at, who you are, what your likes, what you don't likes, what you're willing to tolerate, what you're not willing to tolerate. And then you're able to show up as, hey, this is who I am. This is who I am. Now, this leads to my other point is you having the fear of judgment. You're worried about what other people think all the time. So that's why you can't show up as the best version of yourself because you're trying to show up as a version of what you feel like other people will accept you for. Now, when you do that, are you really living for yourself? Or are you really living for other people? Are you really living for yourself or are you really living for other people? Because when you're living for other people, what happens now is that you're not really genuinely being able to be your authentic self in these moments. You're not able to bring that version of yourself that you really want to put forward because you're holding back because you're worried about what other people think. Now, that fear of judgment can be very detrimental and a big hurdle because if you're not able to overcome that thought of, hey, I'm worried about what other people think, or I'm hesitating what I feel like other people should be doing, it's going to create a huge barrier in your life. You're not going to be able to show up as your authentic self. The other thing I will go through, the last thing I will talk about more so is the lack of self-awareness. You can't really show up as the best version of yourself if you don't really know who you are as a person. I'll say that again. You cannot show up as the best version of yourself if you do not know who you are. This is a big question mark I always get in, like, when I talk to my clients, it's like, how do I figure out who I am? How do I figure out, what my place is in the world? Like I'm doing things that don't feel like they really align with who I am. One thing that really grounded me, especially in determining like who I am, was understanding that my life is bigger than what I may feel like it should be. For me to really fully submit to God to have a better understanding of who I am was really helpful in identifying what my place is in the world. Not being tied down to just like one thing, more so like when I say tied down is like identifying myself with what I do. Men, we do that a lot. We identify who we are, our self worth into what we do. Like, hey, I am a electrician. I am like for myself, I am a therapist. I'm a social worker. Folks will be like, hey, I'm a plumber. Or, hey, I'm in construction. This is what I do. And when that thing is stripped away from you, you don't really know who you are. So when you talk about being the best version of yourself, you have to understand who you are outside of what you do. Because yeah, you may, I know a lot of folks like, hey, I want to do things to help people for a living. I feel satisfied when I'm able to do my work and somebody else is happy. That's all great and dandy. Like that's nothing wrong with that at all. But is that thing that you're doing actually who you are, if that makes sense? So you keep more so backing up, you can't identify yourself with what you do because if you do that and that one thing is gone, say for example, you're no longer a construction worker, you're no longer, working as an electrician or whatever it may be, are you going to lose yourself? Because the best thing for you to have done was really know in the process of becoming wiser and becoming older and living on this earth is for you to understand who you really are. Now, when you're not able to understand who you really are, you can't develop that self awareness. You then, in turns, cannot really understand what the best version of yourself looks like. Now, you can always self explore. Now, when you self explore, it's going to change over time. It's going to change over time because the more you start to really may want to change, the more things you want to improve in. So, take this as okay, at this age, I know who I am. Now there may be some fundamental things that, okay, I know I like this in a relationship or that in a relationship, or I know like my love for God isn't going to change. There might be those more constant things in your life, but don't be afraid to challenge some of the things you felt like you liked before, or those things that you identified with before, um, and allowing those things to change for yourself, allowing those things to change not only your self-awareness but also your self-identity because again you want to be able to be more clear and have that be a thing that you're constantly learning about yourself, because it's not like a pinnacle that you hit like, oh, I know who I am, because life is going to throw you different scenarios and different circumstances that is going to test and challenge who you feel like you thought you were, which will force you to adapt to become somebody else sometimes. So, in closing, I would like to, leave you guys with this: is understanding one, who you are, show up as the best person yourself, especially when we talk about dating. You want to be able to put your best foot forward, because if you don't, then you're not going to really attract the person that you really want. Perfectionism, understand that perfectionism isn't real. Perfectionism is not something to strive for when you're talking about dating. It's more so about doing your best. And lastly, the fear of failure, making sure that you're not worried about what other people think, and you're embracing failure as a way to learn. You know, you can't learn, as much as you want to learn, unless you're willing to fail at some areas or not be so strong in some areas. Because we don't know everything about everything. I appreciate y'all for tapping in. Make sure you guys share this live with somebody who feel like this was helpful. I want to hear from y'all in the comments as well. What are you guys' thoughts about becoming your best version of yourselves, or maybe some things that other things to consider when we talk about being the best version of yourself? I appreciate y'all for tapping in. Y'all take care.